Okay, thank you so much for coming to the center virtually tonight. I'm Carolyn Merrick, Program Coordinator, and welcome to the center's speaker series on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Everybody, pardon me, everyone is muted for the presentation part of Charlene Green's talk, which will be about 30 minutes. She's going to allow a lot of times for question and comments. So if you have any questions or comments, you can please put them in the chat, and Enid Krieger will be fielding those questions to Charlene at the end of Charlene's talk. Thanks to the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee for their hard work in putting together that third speaker series. Special thanks to Enid for creating and curating this event, and for all the speakers giving generously of their time and expertise. Also, we're grateful to our volunteers and all who make the center the wonderful place that it is. Excuse me. If you would like more information about the center, I'll put the center's website in the chat, and you can subscribe to our electronic newsletter, which comes weekly, and find out what we do here other than the speaker series. If you would please stay till the end to fill out a survey, we really appreciate it. Also, if you have any feedback you'd like to give to Charlene or the center, you can email it to me. I'm the one who sent you out the invitation. So for now, I'll turn it over to Vince Walker and Peter, I'm sorry, Peter Thompson, our center director. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. And thank you also to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, a group of center members, staff, and board that have been working on all kinds of ways to help the center be a more inclusive and equitable organization, including putting on these speaker series. And thank you all for joining us. Many repeat and some new faces again today. So thank you for joining us. The center, if you're not familiar, is a nonprofit organization, kind of a community center, a teen center for people age 50 and better. We focus on healthy aging, but are open to all and encourage people to engage with us. Since 1960, we have been serving and positively impacting our community by providing research-based programs in holistic wellness that are known to create the key ingredients for aging well. Lifelong learning is a key component of that. It's something that we have always done, providing information such as this speaker series that is hopefully thought-provoking and hopefully action-provoking, in this case, for you to be a good citizen and a good member of our community. Our board and our staff and all of our membership and participants and stakeholders of the center have embraced work towards being a more inclusive organization and working towards building bridges to be a more inclusive community. And a few of you have heard, and more will in the future. We are developing an action plan, a racial equity action plan in the coming months to put some of our words into action internally and ultimately to help our overall community. So you'll be learning more about that in the future through our e-newsletter and other things. And if you're interested in learning more, you can certainly communicate with me or Carolyn, and we can be found also on our website. I want to thank Charlene for joining us tonight. She's got a big job and a very full life, and she's made time to prepare and join us tonight. Thank you for providing your wisdom and experience with us. And lastly, before I turn it over to Vince, I want to thank all of our folks who make the center happen philanthropically. We get no government funding. We rely on the individual philanthropy from friends like you and I. So if you support us, thank you. If you're interested in supporting the center and the kind of work that we are doing tonight, please visit thecenterinc.org/donate. We'd be happy to have you join our philanthropic family. And now to introduce our speaker, I'm pleased to introduce my esteemed colleague who keeps the center going on a day-to-day basis, Vincent Walker. Vince, it's all yours.
Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. I am pleased to be here this evening for this final presentation in our third speaker series. We listened to some really honest, profound, and difficult presentations over the last 4 weeks. Difficult to hear and difficult to present. As we reach the end of this series, though, I think we can all agree that, yes, discrimination against Black Americans is embedded in the political, economic, and social structure of our country. But with open communication, self-education, understanding, commitment to change, and time, we have the ability to create an anti-racist society here at the center and in the community at large. It is my privilege to introduce this evening's speaker. Everyone who knows Charlene Green knows that she's been in the fight against racism and social injustice for many, many years. As a teacher, assistant professor, and consultant on cultural issues. There's no better person to tie what we've heard over the past 4 weeks together and move us forward in our anti-racism efforts. Charlene, originally from Cincinnati, Ohio, holds a master's degree from UVA's Curry School of Education, and returned to Charlottesville in 2000 as the Central Office Administrator for Equity and Diversity for the Albemarle County School System. In 2010, she was recruited as the program coordinator for the city's Dialogue on Race. This was an initiative conceived by the late City Councilor Holly Edwards to highlight and restore Charlottesville's African-American history. In 2014, Charlene became the outreach specialist for the Office of Human Rights and was named its manager the following year. Last year, Ms. Green was appointed to a position that I think allows her to live her commitment to justice and equity, this time in the housing arena as Deputy Director of the Piedmont Housing Alliance. As I said, Charlene has been doing DEI work for a long time. She has spoken about race and institutional power on various news outlets in our local schools, at UVA, and at the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center. She's facilitated the City of Charlottesville's Blue Ribbon Commission on Race, memorials in public spaces. She's a member of the steering committee of the Equity Center at UVA. In other words, for some time now, Charlene has been helping, as she says, to connect the dots between Charlottesville Black history and the issues the city faces today. Please welcome Charlene Green.
Thanks. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I hope all of you are hearing some of those really nice words. When I hear that, I'm like, I'm old. God, I'm old. I've been doing this forever. And forever in a good way. I haven't gotten to that place yet where I've seen some folks who just get tired. I hope I don't get to that place because the work is challenging. So I want to thank Enid for inviting me to be a part of this. This conversation, this topic, this dialogue is something that we just need to be doing on a ongoing basis. And I think there's some things that in understanding ourselves that we can come to some conclusions about. Hopefully that helps move the conversation forward, or at least keeps it in the air. Because when we relax and think that, oh, things are better or fine, something else happens, and typically it tends to be tragic, unfortunately. So let me just give you a little bit of a snippet about who I am, because that has impacted what I do today in my social justice work. As Vincent said, I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, the oldest of 9 kids, 6 of whom I grew up with, lived with, 2 I found out about later. But in the process of where I fell in the sibling order, and some of the things that I experienced as a female, and then when I became more aware as a Black person, things started to fall into place for me that just kept pointing to, that's not fair, that's injustice. That's because our family didn't do anything regarding civil rights or being politically active in any way. It was, you got up, you went to school, or you went to work, and you came home and you took care of business, and you did your best to stay out of trouble. And so, but when you start to, as Vincent said, connect the dots, I saw how being a female and not being allowed, for instance, in the the boys club, it wasn't the Boys and Girls Club at that time. I had to stand outside and look through the glass window. I remember doing that, watching my brothers play basketball. And I'm like, that's not right. And so that just sparked my interest in being physically active and playing as many sports and being on different teams as much as possible. And when my brother was injured in gun violence and had to recover, and to this day he is brain damaged from the bullet that he took to the head. In helping him recover, I saw the things that he experienced that again pointed to the issues around disabilities and how I thought that's not fair, that's not right. And then all of that started to fall into play with as I started to understand what it meant for me to be Black and growing up in Cincinnati, Ohio. And some of that really coming to light in high school, but then just really blowing up for me in college as an undergraduate because I went to a private Catholic women's college, and I was one of a handful of Black women who went to that college and just experienced things that I never ever thought someone should experience, whether it was the ignorance about what it meant to be who I was as a human being, or the things that people would say in front of me, but then look me in the face and say, "Oh, but you're not like them." And so it was the culmination of those experiences that I think made me want to focus on the injustices that I experienced growing up, that I saw my family members experience growing up, and not wanting that to be someone else's experience if I had any influence in that situation. And so it was very personal in that way. And it became even more personal when my son was born, who is the son of two moms, one Jewish, and the fact that he's biracial, and he's exceptionally smart, and also very, very tall. And so the things that I experience as a mom when my son walks out the door, because he's 6'5.5", but he's only 15 years old, and always being concerned, well, how is he going to respond if somebody stops him or questions his presence in a space, and I'm not there to interpret for him or to protect him. And so now being in that place of educating our son and trying to navigate and negotiate his whiteness and his Blackness and all of the other things that mean for him have been this ongoing educational experience for me, as I think about what does white privilege mean, and how do I either take advantage of it or understand it better, or just figure out what to do with it. So that was my pathway to where I am right now, and in understanding why it was important for me to stand up and speak out and get involved and be action oriented around social justice. And part of that social justice is understanding, what does white privilege mean to me? And so I want to preface the words that I'm saying with, these are my thoughts. These are my opinions as one Black woman. I am not speaking for the Black folks in Charlottesville or the state of Virginia or in general. I'm speaking for me. And so as you hear me and you're trying to understand where I'm coming from, and hopefully posing questions to you that you're thinking about, that this is Charlene. And for those of you who know me from way, way back that's Chuck. That's Chuck. That's my nickname, for those of you who don't know. And that's a whole nother session. So how to leverage whiteness in a broken system. I was thinking about that in a couple of ways. And the first way was thinking about it personally. What are those ways in which I try to leverage whiteness? And the first thing, the obvious thing that came to mind for me was thinking about it in a personal way around safety. Because when I was growing up, the things that my mother taught us, my mother, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, when we were out was, how not to get in trouble because we were Black. You walk in a store, you put your hands behind your back because you don't want anybody to assume that you're stealing something. And as I got older, I realized that that was something that was only done with Black kids and it wasn't done with white kids. So if I am friends with white kids and we go out somewhere, maybe I won't get in trouble, or no one will assume that I'm a troublemaker because I'm in the presence of a white person. The times where that didn't happen, and I've either wished I was white, or I had somebody white with me, I thought my life was in danger. Well, one time that happened, I was driving back home from Cincinnati to Charlottesville through West Virginia, and my car broke down. And it was just me and my two tiny little dogs. And didn't have a cell phone, had a CB, and I was trying to figure out how I was going to get to a safe place. And what ultimately happened, to make a long story short, I walked toward what I thought was a row of houses, and in the on the front porch and in the driveway of the house were 6 older white men. The guys on the porch were drinking beer, and I froze in my tracks, trying to figure out what do I do. And they saw me, and so in my nicest voice, I said, I need some help. My car broke down, and they were very, very polite, but I still was scared. And so they offered to go and help me. And so I got in the car with the oldest guy because I thought if something were to happen, I could take him out, right? But I'm scared to death. And ultimately, they couldn't fix my car, but they got me to a hotel where then this older white woman just questioned me up and down about whether or not I could pay for the hotel because I didn't have cash on me. I'd just given all my cash to the guy who pushed my car to the car dealership. So it was one thing after another. I wasn't afraid because I was a female at that time. I was afraid because I was Black and I didn't have anybody white next to me, or I couldn't depend. I couldn't trust that the folks who were giving me the impression that they were helping me were not going to harm me. With all the things I had read about and heard about from my family members and you saw on TV and different stories, I was scared to death. So in my mind, I needed somebody white with me to make sure that I was okay. When my son and I were down in Florida visiting his grandparents on his other mother's side, who are white, and we were in their senior complex, and Max and I decided to go swimming. We didn't go with his grandfather or his grandmother. It was just me and Max. And we were the only 2 Black people probably in the complex, but definitely at the pool. And everybody looked at us. And I had a couple of people question us. Why were we there? Who were we there with? And again, it's needing to have somebody white with us to justify our existence. And knowing that that's jacked up and that shouldn't have to happen, I also know the reality of that is that sometimes it might need to happen. So initially, when I was thinking about leveraging whiteness, I was thinking about it in that personal way with around safety. And the other way that I was thinking about it was how to educate my son about what it means to be white, because I have no idea. I can speculate, but other than his other mother, who else and how else can we convey to him what it means to be white? Because that's something that he thinks about. I can say he's not struggling, but he's definitely, that's something that he thinks about. So there's that, trying to leverage whiteness for me, looking at it from that personal perspective. And there are probably some other ways in which I haven't articulated that leveraging whiteness, when you think about it professionally with work, which I'll get more into that social organizing perspective of leveraging whiteness, but just personally from a work perspective, it's I think understanding the ways in which you utilize all of the tools that you have access to, whether it's through race and ethnicity or socioeconomic status or any other status that helps you get stuff done. And sometimes in trying to message an important point, it's heard differently from folks. Some people hear it differently from me versus someone like Bob Garrity, who, I admire and have worked with in lots of different ways. And people will hear things differently when you've got those different folks expressing those thoughts. And because we've worked together and we talk about it and we plan for it, we know it's going to happen, right? And so that's one way that in a professional, personal way that I see leveraging whiteness as a way to make sure that the message that you're trying to get across hopefully gets across in a way that makes sense to people so that they can step out of their circle of comfort and try to make things change. So there's that column that I was thinking about leveraging whiteness and what that could mean. And then I've thought about the other aspect of that and I think as I thought about three major points, the first thing in trying to figure out how do you leverage what it means to be white so that you can try to make things better, you've got to understand how it gets in the way. And so one of the first things that I thought about in those three different points was someone who uses their whiteness as the savior. They're going to come in and they're going to fix it. They're going to make it better because they know they've got all of the answers. They've got all the right answers. And some of you have some people in mind when I say something like this about who is that person who thinks that they understand what's going on and they're going to come in and fix that situation without talking to the people it impacts, without getting their opinion, without understanding what is it that these folks need and what is their opinion and how can their experiences be brought to the table to be used in a way that gets something done instead of just waiting for somebody to come in and do it. And in my many, many years of doing this kind of work, especially in the Charlottesville area, there are a couple of key people who, for me, wear that hat in a huge way. I'm not going to name any names, but the fact that it's challenging when you're trying to work with someone who has the best of intentions in wanting to use themselves as a vessel to make things change, but they're doing the same thing, or they're doing similar things in not listening and not paying attention, and just making things even worse. And so someone, and I am going to name this person who I think does it really, really well, is Lisa Drain. And Lisa, I'm sorry if I'm, embarrassing you, but, and there are lots of other people I could name, Frank Dukes, Linda Dukes, Bob Garrity, Allison Lynn, and I apologize if I didn't mention your name, but I'm holding up Lisa as an example. Yeah, nice. I'm sorry, Lisa, but what I see that you do well, and some of the other people who do this work well in terms of understanding how their whiteness impacts the work that needs to happen, is that she is really good at listening and making sure that as she stands up for what is right and what we're trying to do, that she's not putting herself forward. She's listening and putting the people that are at the center of what we're trying to work on forward, centering people of color. Whether it's you're working on issues related to women, it's putting the group forward. And so, there's so many people that I could list who are good at doing that. Lisa came to mind because we're working together closely right now with some of the food justice stuff and on some of the properties that we have at PHA. And so once you understand what that means and how that power impacts what can do to a situation that that we all needs attention, then it becomes so incredibly powerful. You gain the respect and the trust of the people that you're working with, so that there is no question about why is that person in the room. And so standing up for the issues that we know impact race and racism and social justice, but listening to the people it impacts the most is critical. So don't be that savior, be that listener. Stand up and be that listener. The second point that came to mind for me in leveraging whiteness and what can get in the way is ignoring the history. And sometimes with that is using certain language that people drop because they think, oh, well, that means I'm woke. I'm real woke. I never fall asleep. That's how woke I am. And so it's important to know the history, and that could go back as far as 400 years in an area versus just a few weeks ago. And before you start to get involved and think you know what you're doing, right? That's also connected to that fix it. I'm going to come in and fix it because I know everything. And what you're doing in that respect It's letting people know that no, you don't know what you're doing. And I think when I see people who try to step forward in that way, and they're not understanding, they're not connecting the dots of the things that happened, a few years ago. They think they're coming in and they're doing something brand new, when there are people in this community who have been working on some of the social justice issues for a very, very long time. And when you don't have that presence of mind to have had the conversations around the community before you start to throw your weight around, then it looks like you're being disrespectful to the people who have come before you, who are still there doing the work, and you're ignoring the things that they have brought to the table and what they're trying to do. So you need to educate yourself about the issues that you think are the focus of the conversation, of the dialogue, of the action. Educate yourself and know what it is that you're working on, so that you and even if you don't have all the answers, or not even the answers, the understandings, that you are humble enough to then ask questions. Who do I need to go and talk to? Who should be a part of this? Who am I missing? Because when you come across as the big person in the room with all the answers, you look bad, and then nobody wants to jump on your wagon to try to get this ongoing issue that we know around race and racism and social justice. We're not going to move the needle, at least not with you in that position. And so then the third thing that made me think about the using whiteness, leveraging whiteness, is how some folks move the focus to something else, because even though the intention, the title of the meeting, or whatever is happening is about race and ethnicity, the discomfort within an individual who's trying to, be action oriented, they move the topic to something else because they can't handle the conversation, they're uncomfortable with the conversation, or they just don't know what they're talking about. And so, and I've seen that with white folks who want to help, but they're just not comfortable with how that help needs to happen. And so, again, that goes back to being able to listen, making sure you're educating yourself, but then also you're centering the people who's most impacted by the issues that you're trying to focus on. And I think if there can be some attention given to making sure that the whiteness, the way in which whiteness is not getting in a way that you can leverage that whiteness, is by standing up and listening, educating yourself, and centering people of color. I think without getting too academic about this, I feel like that's a good start, because you had, Susan Bro talking about what white privilege meant to her, and she made some really good points, and I think it's important for white people to hear a lot from other white folks about what that all means for them. Just like I think it's important for Black folks to talk with other Black folks about what it means to be Black, and multiracial and biracial people to talk with each other about what it means to be multiracial and biracial. If we're not talking to each other and articulating and hearing the words come out of our mouth about what that all means for us. It's just a conversation we have in our head. And then when something comes up, sometimes we trip over ourselves because we're not sure how to take those first steps, so that we keep walking. You're going to trip sometimes. I trip. I have, I share a story some of you may have heard about how when I was assistant professor at Millersville University, and I was very comfortable in my knowledge and ability to organize a conference around multiculturalism, and I was on top of things, right? And one of our speakers, our keynote speaker actually, we had chosen him, and so we had asked for a headshot, and he sent us his headshot. An attractive Black man who, in his headshot, he had this cheesy little grin and a hat that he had tilted one way and sunglasses. And I'm thinking, this guy's a university professor. We can't use this photo. And so I just made all kinds of assumptions and just, put his bio in the program and didn't use his picture. And then the day we had the conference, he shows up, he's walking toward us with a cane. He's got his hat on and he's wearing sunglasses. And the man was blind. And that was the reason why he was wearing sunglasses. And I was so embarrassed. Here I am, I'm supposed to be Miss Multicultural, and I just fell all over myself that day. And what that taught me was that A, I don't know everything. B, it's okay to make mistakes. And C, also make sure you learn from those mistakes. And so I know that I'm gonna mess up at some point, but I'm going to be okay because of the people I know that I have around me to help me process when something like that happens. And so I think we all need to make sure that we give ourselves those permissions when we know we're going to mess up, because we can't be perfect. And that's how I would like to think that I'm continually trying to understand for me what it means to be Black. And for my friends and family members and colleagues who are white, I hope that they all are giving themselves permission to make mistakes and fall down as they're understanding more and more what it means to be white, and what is that privilege or advantage. I would argue that. Perhaps using the word advantage as opposed to privilege might be, at least for me, a better way of looking at this. What kind of advantages do you have with being white? I think about what are the advantages I have with being able-bodied. I don't know that I have privileges. I don't know that it's that special, but I do have some advantages with being able-bodied. What does that mean for folks who happen to be white? And so I'm going to stop there. That might be my first question for you all. And if you want to respond to that, do you like advantage versus privilege? Do you have a preference? Entitlements, what is that word that you can use to get folks to the table to talk? What do you think, Enid? Can't hear you.
I'm trying to get one of these interesting questions that just came in. Doesn't necessarily answer what you just asked, but.
That's all right. I just put it out there.
Okay. Is there any group in Charlottesville made up of Blacks and whites that get together on a regular basis to discuss the issues of race? Judith Minter has suggested coming to the table chapter, here.
Mm-hmm.
Are there others?
Yeah, some of them are committees that have been put together, whether it's the Human Rights Commission, where you have folks who come together and try to address issues. You have the White Feather Project with Reverend Pat over at Trinity Episcopal Church. You have your committee at the Senior Center. You have the Truth and Reconciliation work that Frank Dukes has organized with folks throughout the city and county who are trying to figure out, how do we get people to hold themselves accountable, institutions to hold themselves accountable for the way in which they've supported and kept in place issues of white supremacy. You have the Equity Center and the work that they're doing. And I could list lots of more. Yes, but there are groups. There are definitely groups of people. Some we are very familiar with because they get a lot of press and publicity, and others we don't, who quietly meet and do their thing and have an impact in the circles that they run in.
Yeah. And, it's interesting that you say that, Charlene. We do have a lot of things going on in town. And one of the comments that you made was that, people should listen and learn and understand what other people have been doing, because the work has been going on for a very, very long time.
Long time.
And so any white person can't just jump in and think that, okay, I'm the savior and I'm going to take care of this without knowing what other work has been going on.
And I see it unfortunately a lot because Charlottesville, it's a transitional town because of the university, and it amazes me how, for instance, when I was the program coordinator for the Dialogue on Race, and the first time that happened back in 2010, 2009, 2010. A lot of participation from folks in the city. And then the second organized iteration of it happened in 2017, 2018. And there were a handful of folks who had participated in the first round of the Dialogue on Race.
Right.
And there was so much that came out of it, but there were a lot of new folks. And in those new conversations, you had people who weren't aware of all the stuff that had gone on. And it's like, who holds all of that knowledge? Where does it need to live so that we're not, there is always a need to repeat things. I think you learn a lot when you repeat things and answer the same kinds of questions, because you're in a different place. You're in a different part of the pool, the swimming pool, if you see it like that. But folks need to be open to the fact that they're not the first to have this conversation.
Right.
They're not the first to bring it to the table.
That's important. In terms of those, do we prefer advantage or privilege? Privilege, to one of our participants, sounds entitled. And another participant says we prefer the word advantage as opposed to privilege. Lisa says, if you are white and have financial means, you can leverage your advantage by donating to Black-led organizations and Black-owned businesses. That's one way to help.
Definitely.
Yep.
Yeah. And I saw Bruce Penner's question about where was I during Unity Days in 2019. Well, Bruce, I left my city government job and then got super, super involved with all of my housing issues. And so I didn't allow for any time to get involved with Unity Days. And I knew it was much smaller group of events, but I was paying attention.
Right.
Thank you for asking.
This is a question for everyone, actually. Do you believe all white people are racist?
Great question.
It's a question that everybody that's listening should be asking themselves. But
I agree.
they're asking you right now.
Yeah, well, I think it depends on how you define racism. You know, for me, and I came to know and understand racism through my mentor, Bob Covert. And as we talked about what that meant, it was looking at the definition of racism in one of two ways. You either defined it as prejudice, racial prejudice and discrimination that equaled racism, or you called it racial prejudice and discrimination with the power to enforce it. And I was, for a time there, I was attached to that definition of the power to enforce it. And as I understood it, and this was how the People's Institute for Racism and Beyond, Undoing Racism and Beyond, that was my first anti-racism workshop. The way they described that definition, Black people, people of color couldn't be racist because we didn't have the power to influence and enforce systemic racism. And so when I read Ibram X. Kendi's book about how to be anti-racist, because I struggled with some of that. Well, what about, you know, I had questions, let's say, about the definition I was thinking I understood. And then I read Ibram's book, and my head exploded. And I think that I think you're either a racist, it doesn't matter who you are, if you're not working toward undoing racism. And so that's where I am right now. And I might be in a different place if I find another book that helps me make sense of things and my head explodes again. I might come to another definition, but for right now, I like how Ibram X. Kendi makes sense of that.
Yes.
There are lots of questions there.
Oh, well, they're not, some of them aren't really questions, they're
Some of them
opinions,
are comments.
which is awesome. I mean, we want the opinions. Let's see.
Sure.
I think privilege gets across the idea that the advantage is unearned, bestowed by circumstance only. You know, that term privilege. Somewhat.
Yeah.
It's something that we talked about in the past that I think I said it, that you know, just because you're white doesn't mean that we think that you haven't had problems in your life or that life hasn't dealt you, you know, some blows. But because you're white, you get a lot of benefit that you don't have to work for, that Black people don't get.
Right.
So I think we talked about that. Let me see. Let's see. Thanks to, oh, you're welcome. Thanks to Charlene and Enid for helping us white people be in the struggle. You guys are all welcome.
Well,
It's
we
our
all
pleasure.
we are all struggling.
All
And
need to struggle.
We all
Exactly.
need to struggle, and we are all struggling. You know, I have never come across one person who has the answers for everything and is not. My wife Becca is pointing to herself, saying she has all the answers. Not.
See you, Becca.
But no, I think which is why we're so flummoxed by all of this. We're so, you know, there's so much dissonance because we don't talk about it enough. We're not giving ourselves an opportunity to figure out how we're making sense of this. You know, when I think about the young kids, because I love facilitating conversations with the younger kids, they want to talk about it all the time. And it's the adults who prevent them from doing it because they don't, adults are scared to have the conversation. So, when the kids start wanting to talk about it, they're like, shh, we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
Or, that's not the time. And they're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think in light of where we are in this country, we need to talk about it all the time
Every day.
because the only way we will bring about any change is to talk about it and then act on it. Do something. I say that all the time. You got to do something. So one of the things that Allison mentioned last week, and she's bringing it up again now, is that the incredible work of the Jefferson School African American Heritage Center as a place for wonderful programming and opportunities to be together. And she has put the website for the Heritage Center in her note. And I think that along the way, some conversations I've had, people say, well, how can we get to know? I think someone has said, how do you get to know Black people? Well, you go where they are. And the Jefferson School, the African American Heritage Center is one place where they are. They have fabulous programs there, but more people need to take advantage of them.
I agree. And this kind of is attached to someone asking about a tip, that white folks can do more to work on this kind of stuff. I think back when I initially came from Cincinnati to Charlottesville, it was in the sports psych program. And I remember one of my first speaking opportunities, I remember being so nervous in the Curry School auditorium. And it was about Black athletes and people wanting to know, well, how do you learn more about what Black athletes think about? And, and I looked at that person with that Scooby-Doo face, and I hope I didn't make the sound, but it was like, well, you talk to Black folks, if you don't know any Black people or any other folks of color, then you should figure out, like you said, Enid, where Black folks are, and we're everywhere. You can go to the obvious places where, they're the Black churches that are in town and join those congregations or make yourself familiar with those congregations. There are lots of churches or faith-based organizations in town that are diverse themselves. And so, there's that way. You can go to the events that are at the Jefferson School. You can, definitely read books and go to movies, but I believe in the engagement with another human being.
Right.
And that's how you get to understand and know that individual. Because the thing you don't want to do in your attempt at stepping outside your circle of comfort is that you generalize everything you learned about that one Black person that you may have had an encounter with to every Black person that you're going to meet, or
Exactly.
or every Latinx person, or Jewish person. Any of the diversity and how you define it happens. You don't generalize. You just get to know more and more people. And if that is difficult, then you do what's easiest for you, which might be reading a book or watching TED Talks on YouTube, or, the real stuff, not the stereotype stuff that you see in television shows and, superhero movies or whatever.
Yeah. Real things.
Real things. Do the best you can. And
Best you
it's
can.
the best you can. And it's that Maya Angelou quote that I love. You do the best you can with what you got. And when you know better, you do better.
Right. Early on, I got a personal note from Joe Shaver, and he asked a question. He said, when we interact as individuals, should we do it in such a way that we disregard differences of race, or should we always do it with an awareness of race? I answered him by saying, and I want to get your opinion on this. I
Mhm.
answered him by letting him know that it depended on the situation and the setting. But it was important to think about what you're saying or doing, especially if you're meeting a Black person for the very first time. And then you made a comment about working in groups of mixed racial, mixed
Mhm.
races. And I'm wondering, is there anything else? I mean, do you think that I answered him correctly? Or should I develop that answer just a little bit more? I'm not sure.
Well, I'm not going to say that you said it wrong or right. You said it for what it meant for Enid, and
Right.
I think for me, if you're not looking at my skin color, my femaleness, my otherness, then you're not seeing me. And I think it's hard to try to say, well, I'm just, interacting or looking at that person because they're human. I think you need to you can't appreciate the full experience without appreciating what you see in front of you. For all that I bring to the table, I hope people see all of me and not just certain pieces of me that,
Right.
that makes them comfortable. That's how I would answer that.
No, I see. So that kind of goes to that statement that some white people will say, I don't see color. And so that means if you don't see my color, which you cannot miss, that means you're not really seeing me, right?
Mm. Now think about that. I've never heard somebody say, well, I don't see, whether or not you're a boy or a girl or whatever. I just see a person. I've never heard anybody say that. They always say it in reference to
Color.
race and ethnic color. And and so that just tells me something about how that person is at that time making sense about race and ethnicity, that maybe they're not comfortable yet to jump in and have the full conversation. Mm-hmm.
There is one question here that I'm not so sure that we need to discuss this here.
Mm-hmm.
Someone says, I was disappointed in recent social media post of Seville mayor and not sure how to react, feel, or think.
Well, I would say about anything related to issues like that can impact an area. You never have the full picture.
No.
You never ever have the full picture, and so I think I think that's what I would say to something like that.
Yeah.
You need to know.
You need to know all the sides.
You need to feel like you have heard enough to start to make some choices, some decisions about how you feel about what's going on. But in those kinds of situations, especially having worked for the city or having done this kind of work, you never know the whole situation,
right?
Or somebody's struggle, and so I think, yeah.
I think that's good. Leave that there.
Mm-hmm.
Someone wants to know if the center will invite you back to make a presentation on the history of Black people in Charlottesville as you did for CASA. I think it's an excellent idea. I understand I've heard you speak so many times and all of your presentations are great. So I'm pretty sure that one was an excellent presentation. And yes, at some point, I'm sure that we can get you back to the center to make a presentation like that.
Yeah. So next month, which is tomorrow, starting tomorrow, is Fair Housing Month. And so I was just organizing, having a planning meeting with our staff at Piedmont Housing Alliance, that I've tweaked my racial and ethnic history presentation of Charlottesville to focus more on housing. Mm-hmm. And so we will be advertising me doing that presentation most likely toward the end of April. And so just look for more information about that. But yeah, I would be more than, I would be honored to come in and do on behalf of the center a presentation about the racial and ethnic history of Charlottesville.
That would be awesome. Peter Thompson, I hope you're listening.
So someone asked a question that I see here. What would you say to a child who says she sees no color, that all the time, that all the students are the same? And I would just challenge that person, and whether it's a child or an adult, and say, you know, you're looking right at me. Tell me what you see. And if they refuse to say that, you know, that they see someone's ethnicity, or they just want to focus on what you wear or whatever, then I would say I would take that as a cue that perhaps more conversations need to be had about what it means to be who we are and how we identify ourselves. You know, one of the exercises I've done with young people is have them do in a diagram the circles of my multicultural self. Those of you who have been in a Bob Covert workshop, that's one of the things that we've done in the past, and it's still a good opportunity for kids to sit, or an adult to sit and do a self-reflection about, how do I see myself? You know, what are the ways in which I connect to other people?
Right. There have been times when I've been discussing a sensitive issue about race with various groups of people when someone has said that I would never understand since I'm not that color. How do you handle someone who just does not want to discuss and let me learn how they see the issues?
I learned early on that when you are engaging folks in conversations around equity, that you need to meet them where they're at. Holly Edwards would always say that, and that was something I learned early in working with, in doing social justice work, that everybody is not in the same place. And so for those folks who feel pretty strongly about how they view things, then you need to have a series of questions that get them to drop some of those walls, to explore what does that mean, and what is the fear or concern around seeing it one way versus another way. And you just need to engage folks in a series of different questions to hopefully get them to see some things differently. You can't, you know, I've been doing this work long enough to know that I don't have the power to make somebody change or do something different. I can just hope that I've developed a workshop or a conversation or a dialogue in a way that just gets them to question some of the ways in which they make sense of things. And hopefully that moves them to do some things differently. Because that's always my, you know, at the end of a workshop, now that you know this information, how is that going to impact what you do next? Or are you going to continue to do the same thing? Now that you know the way you have characterized something, or the way that you articulate something might be offensive to someone, are you still going to do it? Or are you going to find another way to maybe say those words, or say what you're trying to, you know, mean? And getting folks to answer those kinds of things, hopefully that'll give you some idea of where people are at.
This is a comment. This is a good comment. I believe that we all both Black and white, have been exposed to a certain level of prejudicial thinking, and that in order to counter any racist leanings, we must work hard to control those issues of prejudice. And someone else said, read, read, read.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I have a good friend who I did a lot of early facilitation work with, and typically after you've spent some time, very intensive time together with folks, it can be like therapy. It can be very emotional, and you can say a lot of things that give people the impression that, oh my God, I've seen the light. I'm gonna change my life, and that one facilitator would always slap everybody back into reality at the end when people are giving their final comments and say, you said all these nice words and thoughtful words here at this time. You're going to leave this place with all the people who have been here supporting you, and you're going to go back home to your reality, and you're going to continue to do the same thing that you did before you came to this workshop. Because change is not easy. Commitment is hard. And it takes small steps, consistent small steps, to get to those places where you hope you want to be. And so those are the words that I try to live by, knowing that if I've got to do some super hard work, that it's not going to happen overnight,
right.
that it's going to take some time, unfortunately. Yeah.
Mhm. Which goes along with what Taylor Fromm just said. She's personally, even after over 30 years of working alongside Blacks and learning from them, I still find that I make racist assumptions that I need to check myself on. And that's good that you have to check yourself on it. As
Yes.
a matter of fact, last week, Allison calls it, what is it, stepping in dung? That you're going to step in the dung. You just have to keep trying. Keep working.
Yeah, that's something Allison would say. Yeah.
Yep, that was an Allisonism.
Yep. But that's the reality. She's right. Yeah.
Okay. Here is Kay Monroe. Oh, it's great to see you, Kay. I don't think all white people are racist. I believe more empathy and willingness to engage in conversations are important to understanding. I also think these beliefs are formed in families of origin, and she loves Kendi's work. I agree.
Yeah, and I think it's real important for folks, because this is how you define things determines how you create the strategies to address them. And so how you make sense of how you define what it means to be a racist, and all of those other words that are attached to that determines how you move forward with your actions. And so, that's why it's important to talk. That's why it's important to read, and talk about, what does this mean for me?
Right. Is a barrier to equity the lack of Black wealth compared to the immense wealth in this area? If so, then maybe this can be of use. In Cape Town, after apartheid, progress in building wealth came when the government worked with the informal Black community. Informal equals criminal. Informals can be quite smart. Can Seville do this at all?
I appreciate the way other countries have come to handling issues of inequity, and trying to change things. They don't always translate well to another culture, because the circumstances are just different. There's some similarities, but the circumstances and how things can actually happen in the way that they need to change can be very, very different. And so it's not always this easy transfer of how it happens. I love the way some other countries have addressed the modern day inequities that they have practiced in their countries. You know, whether it's South Africa doing the Truth and Reconciliation, and although, you know, that still wasn't perfect, it was something that some people would say we almost tried to do with Reconstruction, with some of the ways in which the Confederate soldiers were interviewed afterwards, and there are lots of books and stories written about that, but we never truly acknowledged the existence of emancipated Blacks and indigenous folks after that. And so we just moved the notion of slavery into something different with Jim Crow, and then institutionalizing it with laws. So, but, you know, I think there are times when we can look and see what other people have done and see what pieces of that can we pull to make our own, to see if we can make that work.
Listening to podcasts that discuss racism has been a way for me to learn about the history I was not taught in school. Code Switch is a very good one. Everyone got that. Okay, another way to leverage your whiteness is to share your networks and contacts with Black people and organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking bread together is a good vehicle for conversation. I agree.
You know, there are different levels of it, you know, whether it's just
All
meeting
kinds of things.
somebody, you know, having a cup of coffee or whatever. There's that level. And then there's that level where you are looking at the institutional ways in which injustice is
Right.
still there. You know, looking at the laws, the codes, the zoning, understanding the history. When you look at some the work that, for instance, Jordy Yeager is doing with the covenants, the racial covenants in the deeds, and how today that still impacts the segregated neighborhoods that we still have in Charlottesville and in Albemarle, right? Because Black folks couldn't buy the land or buy the home. They could work in it, but the covenant would say, no Black people.
No Black people. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, you know, as the housing rates would rise in terms of the costs would rise, and you couldn't, now it makes it even more difficult to get into those neighborhoods where, you know, you might want to live, whether it's Greenbrier or down Park Street or down Locust or over in some parts of the Venable neighborhood. You can't afford it. You can't afford it. Even though everybody now can buy wherever they want, you can't afford it. And that maintains that level of segregation that some people, you know, take advantage of. Because they know they don't have to interact with the poor Black kids or the poor Latinx kids in their neighborhood. And I'm saying it that way because I've heard people make those kinds of statements.
Mm-hmm. There are many suggestions for podcasts that we can all look at, and I won't go through all of them because, you know, you all may recall that at the conclusion of this, Carolyn puts together all of the resources that we have and shares it with everyone. So all of those will be shared at some point in the future. Following Black and Brown individuals on Twitter has been helpful for me. Historians, journalists, artists, attorneys, authors, politicians, etc. People from a range of ages, backgrounds, gender identities. Okay, so that's all part of that. Let's see. Charlene's point about educating ourselves about history is another documentary that we will get, has to do with uncomfortable truth. And a book, Waking Up White. We'll get all of that to you. I'm trying to get down to the questions because we've got lots. Okay, what would you say? Oh, we answered that one.
Oh, I think a really good book that people should add to their list if they haven't done it already is The Sum of Us, where it's looking at how, some people think racism only impacts people of color, especially African-American folks.
Right.
But it hurts us all. And the author of that book does a really good job of giving you example after example of how, shutting down a swimming pool because you don't want Black people to swim in that pool, even though the law says it's okay to do it. But instead they fill it up with cement. So now nobody can swim. Well, duh, that doesn't just hurt Black folks. That hurts the white folks who can't go swimming there anymore. So I think understanding concepts like that, where, some people think they're getting over by excluding folks in different ways, it comes back to get you.
Right.
And
I sometimes feel like I'm hurting my Black colleagues when I talk a lot, too much about anti-racism and white supremacy. Can you give me some advice?
don't talk that much. I mean, sometimes response to these things are not terribly difficult, and I apologize if that seemed to be aloof or it's just that if you know what you're doing is not positively engaging your colleagues, then figure out, you may just need to ask, what makes, how can we, what's a good way for us to talk about these things? And it may be, and this is a reality that some folks, some white folks struggle with, is not every Black person or not every brown person wants to talk to you about race. Don't assume that they want to educate you about race, that they're into it as much as you might be into it, because that's your struggle. They might have a struggle, but unless you talk to them and ask them what it is, it may not be what your struggle is. And so that's where the relationship building makes sense in getting to know people who have different experiences than you. That was some of the positive stuff I tried to take away from my experiences as an undergrad. For a lot of the young white women who came to that school never ever having met a Black person before, and they would come up to me and touch my skin and touch my hair and ask me all kinds of questions about the food that I eat and how I took a shower or bath or
Yep.
Relationships
Important. Yep. Okay, we've got more events and things that we can see, virtual events. Wonderful virtual event planned for the memorial to enslaved laborers on Friday, April 9th and Saturday, April 10th. And I would advise everyone to see that. I think that everybody should go and visit that memorial. If you have not seen it, it's something
amazing.
not to be missed.
Mhm.
Okay, you put the sum of us in, Carolyn put the sum of us in. You're going to get all of those references afterwards, so don't worry about that. Carolyn, help me if I'm missing anything, because
Well,
sometimes
I just found a comment particularly amazing. Charlene is trying, I think, to get us out of the ferocious grip of abstractions and generalities. I don't see color as a particularly pernicious one. That's food for thought for me. Abstract abstractions and generalities. It's a good way to kind of look at it. So
Yeah.
you want to comment on that? That's the only thing I see that you missed, Enid. You didn't even miss it.
my fingers shoots past so fast. Sometimes I think I missed something. You want to comment?
Well, I think the only thing I would say to that is sometimes we get in our heads too much and we miss what's right in front of us about the experiences that we need to have, the conversations and the people that we should be talking to, whether it's taking a walk with them down the river View Park, or getting on the having a virtual cup of coffee with somebody, and just talking about the ways in which you grew up. I mean, some of the questions I like to ask folks in some of my workshops that I do is, what were some of the messages you got about what it meant to be a man or a woman? Or what were some of the messages you got about what it meant to be black or white? Or, sometimes just talking about some of those very simple questions can lead you down pathways that you might not have ever thought that you would go down.
Mhm.
I think so. I can't imagine we're going to have
Someone is on their phone. And then
That's my Becca. She just got onto it.
Oh, that's Becca. Okay.
Yeah.
Chuck's doing the meeting.
Okay. If it's coming out of your household, I will
It
accept
is.
it. Then I'll accept it. What are the efforts currently being made to increase voting access and equity in Charlottesville and Albemarle? It's very discouraging watching the voting restriction laws in Georgia and perhaps coming in Florida.
Yeah, I think there are lots of actionable items that you can jump on and start to devote time to. And so, making sure that and paying attention to what the General Assembly is focused on politically, and who are those leaders that support those things that you think are important. You pay attention to those things, and that's where you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of what's important to you. So, finding out, like donating to Black Voters Matter, or that somebody just posted, or like I said, paying attention to those folks who are running for office, whether it's a school board or a city council. You make sure that they support the values that you think are not going to take away rights from anyone, especially when you're looking at things that we just expect to be there. It makes me sad to see what's going on in Georgia, and knowing that it can happen there, it can happen here.
It happened here.
And, we're in trouble if we don't pay attention to this stuff.
How do we productively discuss the issue of reparations, particularly addressing housing inequity?
I think there's so many different ways that reparations can happen. It's not just somebody writing a check to somebody else and patting themselves on the back. It's thinking about the manner in which wealth was not allowed to happen for Black people. whether that was through employment or education or housing. So, you know, how do we bring our heads together and think about how to try to address that? You know, whether it's through a land trust where you buy the land to ensure that, you know, the folks who want to live in a certain neighborhood can buy the building on that land. But because you have it in a land trust, you're ensuring that it's not going to be bought up by some developer so that the affordable housing aspect of it just floats away, or that the wealth of it, because that individual owns the wealth, they're having the opportunity to start to create some equity in something that they never had before. You know, you got to think creatively about how to make those things happen. And some of them have been in place and we just never knew anything about it. It's a, you know, one of those conversations that I know Frank Dukes is encouraging people to have through the Truth and Reconciliation conversations. I think one more question.
Oh, how's that time? Oh,
It's almost 7:00.
it's almost 7 o'clock and we have to get our survey done, right? So let's
Mm.
see. All right, there's lots of information here and you know, you'll get it all. All right, let's see. Let's find another one. I think this was wonderful, this whole discussion. Thank you. Thank you so much, Charlene. Oh, ask the question by Teller Stalford about using your white privilege. I have to go back to Teller Stalford. Can you find that one, Carolyn? That'll be the last one.
Looking for it. Yes. What are the efforts currently being made to increase voting access and equity in Charlottesville and Albemarle? That's what Teller's question was.
I thought I asked that one.
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Yeah, we did ask that one.
Well, yeah, I don't think we said specifically what's happening in Charlottesville and Albemarle, except donating to the Black Voters Fund. But I think encouraging the parties, whether you're a Republican, a Libertarian, a Democrat, to make sure their outreach is to as many people as possible. You know, show the folks who are involved with the planning and who are the deciders, that it's a diverse group of people. You know, because if people aren't seeing that, then it's kind of hard to generate some interest. And you get those same 5 or 6 people who will show up at a meeting because their level of comfort is there. And they've been welcomed by someone at some point that makes them feel like, hey, I can be in that space. Right. And I'm heard. But there are some folks who don't feel that way. And it takes more than one knock at the door. It takes more than one outreach. It takes developing a relationship with folks. And in politics, it's especially hard because oftentimes people of color in our surrounding neighborhoods and across the country actually aren't asked what their opinion is until somebody is you know, running for something. And, you know, except in that window of time, is their thought process even cared about? And then every other time of the year, nobody gives a damn. So you got to step up all the time, not just at certain times.
And I personally am very grateful to this, to the center and to Peter Thompson for encouraging the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to have these kinds of discussions. It's been enlightening also for me as a person who is not a native Charlottesvillian. So.
Well, and I just want to thank everyone for all their kind comments, especially all the folks who I know personally. Thank you so much. And again, thank you all, Enid and Carolyn, for inviting me to do this.
This was wonderful having you. This was great. Thank you, Charlene.
And I'm looking forward to next week.
Next week is going to be good.
Yes.
We've got Bob Garrity, who's going to head it up, but we've got wonderful scribes, and Charlene's going to help kick it off, and you're going to.
I am?
Yeah, you are. You mean nobody told you?
No, I thought it was just a facilitator.
Oh, well, we'll talk about it. You are. You are that. Okay.